Attack on Titan is an action game based on a popular anime of the same name. It's largely split up into two different types of play, with the main attraction being the story mode that loosely follows the events of the show, as well as something called World Mode, where you can create your own character and pick from various missions to play through. When it comes to the actual gameplay, the missions are presented in clusters devoted to each character, but unfortunately there's no difference in how these characters control, and too many of the missions and cutscenes are straight up repeats of each other, rather than showing different viewpoints or enhancing the overall story. Offering multiple playable characters is a cheap, lazy way to make the game seem like it contains more than it does. Sadly, what content there is can't really be called quality stuff, and things are rough from the start. Production values are quite low, with crude character models and bland, simple environments. In combat, it's possible to lock onto various portions of the enemy's body, and when locked, zooming towards them via the grappling hook is a real thrill, and with good timing the strikes chain together quickly. There's a good rhythm to the action, and it's easily the best part of the game. It's also pretty much the only thing the game has to offer. Apart from hitting titans, there's not much to do, and there's not enough variation or depth to the action to keep it interesting for the long haul. Worse, the controls are painfully awkward. When using the standard 3DS camera, control is done by clicking the left bumper so that it quickly snaps directly behind the character, something that's not the best for scanning the environment. The only enjoyment you'll get is locking onto enemies and zipping through the environment. The hardcore fans may want to give it a go, but I'm guessing even they would find it hard to find something to love. Overall, it's best to avoid this one at all costs. On the surface, a beat-em-up based on a popular franchise like Power Rangers with some fan service thrown in sounds like a solid idea. What could possibly go wrong? Well, in the case of Power Rangers Megaforce, everything possible went wrong. The overall presentation is very poor, with constantly looping music in the main menu and an abundance of loading screens for things that really shouldn't require them. Each stage typically starts with a bunch of passable cutscenes before players are thrown into the mess that is the actual gameplay. One major flaw that immediately becomes apparent is the frame rate. It's very unstable and feels like the game could crash at any given moment. Even if it was actually at a remotely acceptable level, the gameplay is nothing more than a joke. The controls feel very stiff, animations are sorely lacking, and the combat consists of mindlessly mashing the attack button to kill dozens of enemies that barely resemble a threat. There is only one standard combo per character, and a button for a single long-range attack. On top of this, there are cards that can be collected and used as special attacks, but these attacks always trigger an annoying cutscene that can't be skipped. And once it's all done, the effect is not even worth the effort, as simply mashing the regular attack button proves to be just as effective. Power Rangers Megaforce is one of the worst examples of a licensed video game in recent memory, featuring terrible gameplay, a sickening frame rate, infuriating voice acting, and utterly shocking production values all around. Unlike many other games of its kind, it has no redeeming factors whatsoever and will do nothing but annoy the hell out of anyone who has the misfortune of playing it. Mad Dog McCree is a game that for whatever reason is released over and over again across a range of platforms that brings its cheesy and often comically bad gameplay to unsuspecting players. Set in the Wild West, the game sees you playing the role of the Stranger, a gunslinger that strolls into a town in trouble. An infamous bandit has kidnapped the mayor and his daughter, and it's up to you to rescue them. The story is paper thin, but it's used to facilitate the gameplay. It's a pity then that the gameplay is just as bad. Originally a game that utilized a light gun, the concept transfers to the 3DS with the stylus taking its place. At first this would seem like a good move, but due to the action taking place on the top screen, it soon becomes apparent that it's anything but, with it seeing you often missing enemies completely because there's no direct relationship between your input and the reticle on the screen above. There are under 10 stages to work through, each lasting a couple of minutes apiece. Enemies pop out of the same locations, and often it's a case of just memorizing where they're going to appear. Of course, the most noticeable feature of Mad Dog McCree are the several FMV movies that serve up the action. They range from the bizarre to downright offensive at points, and to top it off, there's no 3D feature to be seen. The footage is grainy but smooth, though there are odd sound issues that pop up occasionally. Mad Dog McCree on the 3DS might be worth it for folks who want to play the famously awful FMV game and have no other way to do so, but the vast majority of players are better off either ignoring the silly game or tracking it down on a system where light gun games are far more fun to play. The 3DS wasn't really known for its abundance of racing games. The likes of Mario Kart and Ridge Racer more than filled the gap, but that didn't stop other developers trying to get a piece of the admittedly small pie. Asphalt 3D was one of the earliest games on the system, where you'd think the objective would be to showcase what the new handheld was capable of, but Gameloft completely missed the mark and instead produced one of the most shockingly terrible games the handheld ever received. As with most races, it consists of several gameplay modes, with the main focus being the championship. As you progress, you earn money, which can be used to develop your car or purchase new ones entirely. But all of the upgrades in the world won't even make a difference when the fundamental gameplay is so broken. First off, the physics and collision detection are all over the place. Most of the gameplay consists of ramming into walls with little to no consequence, completely negating the need to actually get good at the game in the first place. And this wouldn't be a problem, but due to the speed and amount of turns each track offers up, the gameplay feels like it's just on autopilot. Couple this with the need for power-ups that are scattered across the track, which consistently fail to even register as you drive through them, and what you're left with is a game that's not even worth the plastic it's printed on. When it comes to racing, a solid frame count is vital to the overall feel of the gameplay, and Asphalt 3D falls short of this most basic requirement. Overall, if you're looking to jump into a racer on the 3DS, make sure you leave this one in the bargain bin, right where it belongs. The Combat of Giants series of games is one that has typically failed to impress. This is usually down to the lack of polish, ambition, and general effort on the part of the developers. Combat of Giants Dinosaurs 3D continues this proud tradition of not giving a shit, which makes it one of the worst games the handheld has ever seen. Okay, let's get the good out of the way first, and talk about what the game gets right, and that's mainly its presentation. The game actually looks fairly good. The dinosaur models and environments are well realized and well animated. They help to display the graphical power the 3DS has over the DS, with the stereoscopic 3D being used fairly well, with the distant scenery looking good on top of it. If a game was only to be judged on its aesthetics, it'd be doing okay so far, but the main problem with the game is there's little gameplay to be found, and what little there is uninteresting and samey throughout. You control a dinosaur of your choosing from one of 4 groups: predators, hunters, defenders, and chargers. Each dinosaur group plays the same as all of the others in any combat scenario. Same controls, attack speed, dodge speed, everything. So your choice of faction and dinosaur is officially going to have 0 impact on the game. This simplicity in design might be okay if there was a challenge. Before an enemy attacks, they'll flash bright red. At this point, you just keep hitting dodge until the attack is over, then mash the attack button. Do this until you win. That sums up the game. This game is just too easy, uncomplicated, and unexciting that I just could never recommend it to anyone. Overall, it's cheaply made, unambitious, and was a clear attempt to cash in by being a launch title. The worst kind of game. Coming from the same mind that brought us the likes of Sonic and Nights into Dreams, Rodea the Sky Soldier only manages to get one thing right. That's its story. The Sky Kingdom of Garuda is being invaded by an evil empire, and Rodea, a machine soldier, stops him as expected. But the empire's forces come back, which sees you having to make your way through stages, defeating enemies and collecting various things to help you on your journey to fulfill your promise of protecting the kingdom. If only the gameplay matched this great premise, Rodea would have actually been quite decent, but as you would have guessed, this is its main downfall. Imagine playing a point-and-click adventure mixed with what is seemingly meant to be a fast-paced action game with only the buttons available on the old 3DS system. It just doesn't work as it should. Rodea has to fly from one island to another to reach his goal, and this becomes very annoying thanks to the circle pad targeting system, the flight system that requires pressing A to propel you towards the target. Pressing L and R to rotate the camera by 90 degrees is all the control you have, and this makes everything less fun overall. I would have enjoyed Rodea the Sky Soldier a lot more if there'd been proper circle pad pro or C-stick support for free camera movement, as many situations involve you being stuck in awkward positions, which are just made worse thanks to the horrible camera. Add to this an obsessive amount of useless collectibles that are only there to pad out the playtime, and what you're left with is a poor excuse of the game that will leave you feeling violated after playing. One aspect where Rodea does shine though has to be its visuals. The world is actually quite interesting and designed quite nicely. Soaring through the skies provides an exhilarating experience, which is only hampered by the abysmal controls and terrible gameplay design. As I mentioned, it's designed to be replayed, but trust me, you'll never want to go through it again. The 3DS was well known for its various great and engrossing RPGs, but for every hit, there were a few misses, with the widest miss being that of Langrisser Reincarnation. For starters, it doesn't even bother trying to set up its world or any of its characters. It throws you right into the action as the story begins with the invasion of your kingdom. You play as Aeris, and you're briefly introduced to much of the main cast before picking up the legendary Langrisser sword and heading into battle to defend your hometown. Whereas most RPGs pride themselves on their stories, Langrisser's feels like an afterthought, and as a result completely sucks any enjoyment out of the adventure. The gameplay doesn't fare any better either, with seeing you control a team of up to 8 characters, fighting against armies with troop counts that can be dozens more than what you have at your disposal. With that many people in battle, maps have to be big, but here they're often too big. There were several missions throughout the campaign where it took multiple turns for anyone on my team to engage in their first battle. These massive maps often lead to battles that are way longer than they need to be. There is a class system that hopes to mix things up, but I quickly found out classes don't matter either, as every non-mercenary character can heal themselves and magic in the game is ridiculously weak. You'll find yourself taking out every enemy in the same way, fighting them face to face, which takes away a lot of the strategy RPG fans are used to. To top it all off, this game looks like shit. Other prime candidates for bad 3DS games at least try to look decent, but not Langrisser. The character artwork is either dedicated to fan service or downright ugly. The sprites on the map are subpar, but the real kick in the balls are the battle animations. Some absolute dickhead decided that chibi-looking models running on some flat surface was all the game needed. That would be okay if they weren't hideous, but every time an enemy dies, they just explode, with none of the attacks even being represented once you carry them out. On the whole, there are plenty of solid RPGs that deserve your time over this garbage. If you see it in the wild, avoid it like the plague. Shattered Crystal is a 2D platformer in the style of the original Mega Drive Sonic games. It's largely only a theoretical one, because although the 2D games have varied in quality over the years, this is probably the worst there has ever been. For some reason, one of the main inspirations for the game seems to be Donkey Kong Country, rather than any of the actual Sonic games themselves, starting with the overworld map and the way the game hides secret objects in the levels. Sure, Shattered Crystal isn't as slow as the DK games, but the pace is noticeably below that of what many Sonic fans would expect. There are short bursts where you do get up to full speed, but these are usually broken after a few seconds by an insultingly easy puzzle that requires you to switch control to one of the other characters. Each of these characters possess their own unique abilities that help in overcoming each obstacle, but these interruptions are never justified, and just further slow down and break up the pacing of every level. To add further insult to injury, you'll soon realize the game and its developers are purposefully trying to make your life as miserable as they can, as in order to progress you have to go back to previously completed levels to pick up more collectibles. You don't just beat a level and play the next one, you have to unlock it, and if you haven't collected enough tokens, then there's nothing to do but repeat the whole tedious thing again. Now the visuals are serviceable, not really technically impressive, but at least the frame rate is stable, and you can tell what everything is supposed to be. The art direction on the other hand though is pretty poor, and most of the levels look nearly identical to each other, with appalling level design and gameplay mechanics that seemingly go against everything that once made Sonic great. This adventure is one worth sitting out. Roller Coaster Tycoon has always been one of my go-to games when it comes to killing a few hours of spare time, so the news of it landing on the 3DS was like music to my ears. What we received though was an extremely gutted version of the original, with far fewer options and features to boot. Considering it came out way back in '99, it felt like a real slap in the face, especially considering some of the omissions were just completely baffling. For one, the ability to name your rides, something so fucking basic, was nowhere to be seen. More shockingly was the complete lack of height markers, which were an essential part of the process when it came to designing your own rides and determining their height. Worse still, there was no way to check in on individual guests, with all the valuable information it would usually afford the player being mysteriously absent. But what felt like a literal betrayal was the ability to alter the terrain of your park was completely MIA. Removing one of the most fundamental mechanics of the original game and expecting it to be fine was just such a stupid decision. Whoever designed this game should be ashamed of themselves. One thing developer N-Space did add to the series is a story mode. Sadly, is a bad addition. The story is little more than a young kid exchanging unfunny insults with a retired coaster builder as the latter sets the former on the path to theme park fame. But even if the story was good, who would care? This is a lot of wasted effort to add context to creating rides. It just doesn't need to be there. Roller Coaster Tycoon 3D is a mess of a game that really serves no purpose. It feels unfinished, and the appeal is lost without all the features and functions that made the original great. If, like me, you were hoping to have a portable version of this once great series, you will leave disappointed. The fun of building these crazy rides is hidden behind a wall of frustration that just never lets up. Every once in a while, a game will come along that will completely redefine how you see video games as a medium. Some so completely unexpected and enjoyable that you just can't stop playing. Pac-Man Party 3D is not such a game, however. It feels like it exists to solely rip off its contemporaries and cash in on one of the oldest franchises in an attempt to trick you into believing that playing it is actually worth your time. Much like its name suggests, Pac-Man Party consists of a series of minigames that play out across a Game Boy main story mode. Similar to Mario Party, you'll move around virtual spaces on the Game Boy, and for each space you land on, you'll erect or battle to secure a castle with your icon on it. These castles earn you extra cookies each time you completely circle the map, and successfully winning minigames turns an opponent's castle into one of your own. It's an interesting concept, one that works quite well, but once you've played through a single board, you've seen pretty much everything that the game has to offer. The main issue is the minigames themselves, which are just an absolute chore to play through. There's about 50 in total, with none truly standing out, and a few of them being straight up broken. There's no nostalgia here either, outside of the great games contained within the classic game mode. And though at least half of the minigames are functional, nothing about them feels necessary or relevant. If you're looking for a better option, Mario Party is definitely the one to go for. Well, that does it for the video. Keep an eye out for part 2 as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified when new videos release every Monday and Thursday. You can follow me on all of the socials, which are linked below to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Shudan, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Paul, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy and Paddy J for the continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links down below. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.